lived in South Texas. The family's names were the Trunicks, Tom and Beverly Trunick. My dad would say, I don't believe in God, but if I ever got in a lot of trouble, I would call Tom Trunick because he has a direct line to God. So somehow, a guy who doesn't believe in God knows a guy who has a direct line to God. Doesn't make any sense, right? But he does. And so Tom is an old man now. I had a chance a number of years ago to bring him to one of these events in Texas. We had about 300 people there. And he and his wife stood up, and I got to tell a little story about them. And they got a standing ovation. And they're just like the most humble people in the world. And they just thought it was the highlight of their life. Well, Tom and Beverly, he's in his 90s now. She died a couple years ago. And so I called him and just with condolences, and I told him, Tom, that Bible that I bring to every one of these things, the Bible I've been reading from here this weekend, they've sent that to me when I was graduating from high school, 18 years old. And I was thanking Tom for that Bible and how much of a difference it's made in my life and how God's Word has transformed just me and future generations. And he says, well, when you get to heaven, you need to thank Beverly for that Bible. And I said, well, Tom, I'm thanking you now for sending it to me. He said, well, let me tell you a story. He said, back when you were 18 years old, graduating from high school, Beverly said, I want to send Rob Green a Bible. And I told her, he ain't worth the postage. Why would you waste the money and the God's Word for somebody who's going to trample it? Because he's a clown and someone who just mocks Christianity. And he was right. And I was like, Tom, how could you do me that way, man? You're my guy. You're the guy I've always thought of as the Christian example. He said, yeah, I didn't see it, didn't think that was going to happen for you. And Beverly insisted, and so we sent you that Bible. And I was like, wow, I'm so glad, And that kind of reminds me of Mark's story about that boy. You have a guy in your troop who's a clown. A guy who cuts up and makes noise and doesn't do what he's supposed to do. And the easy thing to do is disregard him and go, you know what? He's not going to really get anything out of this, and it's just distracting other boys, so let's just move on. So I was that boy. And I'm just really glad that Tom and Beverly Trunick, said, we're going to do it. We're going to send them God's Word, because God's Word can transform. And Christian people can transform. They're the only Christian people we knew growing up in Texas. But it made a big difference. So you might be those people or somebody else. Another story I want to tell you, because my wife went down to Peru on a mission trip a number of years ago, and she met Pastor Noe Malpartida. Noe has died, but in years past, his son called me one time from Peru, and in broken English said, my dad is coming to visit you in Florida. And I said, okay. And he said, tonight. And I said, okay. And he said, and he's going to be staying with you. And I was like, all right. And he said, so go down to Miami Airport and pick him up. Now, this was pre-cell phone, right? This is just mid-90s. So I head out from Boynton Beach, Florida, which is an hour and a half. Yeah, hey, Boynton Beach. Hour and a half north of Miami. I start driving down there, and I'm thinking, I'm going to the airport in Miami to pick up the Spanish guy who I've never seen. I don't really speak Spanish. He doesn't speak any English. And so I thought, what would I do if I was him? He's probably aimlessly walking around the airport in the terminal that would have a Peruvian airline in it. So I went to that one and found the Peruvian gate, and there was this guy walking around like this in a leather jacket. And I said, Pastor Noe. We learned to, probably wasn't even a couple weeks, next week or so, we learned to communicate and talk. And he had this ministry going on down in Peru, and it was taking boys 5, 6 years old off the street. There were orphans on the street, taking them to a Christian school and raising them up to learn the Bible over the next 5 or 6 years. At 12 years old, he would send them out into the bush to walk to villages and preach the gospel and become itinerant preachers, and they would win one of the elder in the villages to Christ and that elder in the village would become the pastor. And so the 12-year-old was the itinerant preacher, church planter. Are you guys with me? Okay. So Noe's telling me this, and I'm like, wow, that's amazing. He said, take me to your church. I take him to my church, and I'm trying to translate this, and he says, he wants the pastor of our wealthy church in Boca Raton to give him $2,500 for 25 bicycles so that these 12-year-old missionary kids, instead of walking 6 miles to a village and walking back to the school at night, they could take their bikes out and go twice as far and go 10, 12, 15 miles out and reach the next concentric circle of villages for Christ and plant churches there. And so I'm telling the pastor this, and he's like, so your friend is sending out 12-year-old preacher pastors to plant churches in villages, and you want bicycles to do this? And I was like, mm-hmm. And he said, how do I get them the money? Because this is awesome. And I tell that story because Pastor Noe saw something that we don't see in the United States. Anybody homeschooling here? Homeschoolers? No offense, homeschoolers, but we don't let our 12-year-old cross the street without holding mommy's hand. Fact. A 12-year-old can change the world. He doesn't have to go to seminary, doesn't have to be a Bible scholar, doesn't have to have a degree, doesn't have to be an adult. In some countries, 12-year-olds are going and spreading the gospel and planting churches. And so I think sometimes we go, oh, you know what, when this kid grows up, he's going to, but he doesn't have to. You can do it now. I also want to, I'm not going to use slides. So Jaxon, I know you're ready, and thank you for being ready, but I'm not going to do it. I also want to tell you guys something about, I told you about my own dad. I'm going to wrap up here. So I didn't have a great dad, and I think the last couple years of my life I really got to appreciate him, but until then I didn't. I want to tell you guys I appreciate you. Dads who are here are making a difference. You are ending a cycle. I don't know what your own dad experience was, but you're probably ending a cycle of fatherlessness, or maybe under my generation, people were less connected and they didn't spend a lot of time away from work and being a nurturing force to your kids as you guys are doing now, and it's so appreciated. Maybe your dad didn't tell you that he was proud of you for doing what you're doing, but I'm proud of you. Chris, good job, man. We need that. We need that. We need people to stand up for America's boys, to rescue them, and you're doing it. You're doing it in Trail Life, you're doing it in Good Tube Kids. So, thank you. Everybody's got a story like that. There's something you're doing that is impacting the next generation, and it's so appreciated. I mean, I'm sitting there in my ivory tower in the home office seeing things from 30,000-foot view, but every time I meet someone, I'm thinking, that person is having a huge impact exactly where they are. So, I just want to say thank you for that. And now I'm going to call up Mark Hancock. You met him last night. You were inspired by him, and we get to hear him again. Mark, please come up.
Thank you, Rob. Is this what you all expected? You know, I always wonder, I wasn't in Boy Scouts. You know, my sons were in Boy Scouts, and because I was a homeschooling dad, I went to every meeting and sat in the back of the room. But I always wonder if this is what they do when Boy Scouts get together for a weekend of training and things. I mean, does anybody know? Is that your What did you expect? Did you expect to hear stories like Rob has shared? Did you expect to hear strategies for reaching boys that are broken in a world that doesn't really appreciate who they are? Or did you expect to hear how to get this badge done and how to get that done? So I always wonder, did the guys get what it is that they needed? And I'm hopeful that what we're really depositing is just a sense of appreciation, recognition for the work that you're doing and the difference that you're making in generations. So that's a big deal. If we leave you with something, I hope that that's it. Plenty of practical advice, training, help, all sorts of things on TLC. As you find there through the levels of troop support, you got great point men, you got DSAs, you got your NTOs here, you have a great Power Team 3 in this area. You got guys like Mike Parnell, as the RTL serving, so much support there. But I hope that this was, in some way, has been satisfying for you to hear really the heart and the passion behind the mission, because I think that I know Rob well enough to know that, in fact, when we started out, his plan was to do, I think he shared last night, is I'm going to do this for 6 months and then I'll go along and do something else. And he probably would have if he didn't discover, how much purpose and is hidden in the work that we do here. It's really been quite a surprise to me to see the purposes, the intent of God in Trail Life USA. We thought it was just something that was necessary because the Boy Scouts were abandoning a space, but we've discovered that this was likely his plan all along, to have something like this. Because you can't build godly men without godly men, and very few places that attract godly men and provide for them a sense of community and brotherhood, godly men. Those of you who have served in the armed forces know that when you find your brotherhood there's something there, something that's powerful, experiences you shared together, the mission that you shared together, the shared vision for the purpose that you've been called to, and how that bonds you together. And I think that Trail Life provides that for us, a reason for us to get together, not just because we're a member of something, but because we're doing something that's making a difference. So I think that we're building that. I'm confident. I know that we're building that type of brotherhood of guys who say, yeah, trail men are the best men I know. And so I'm really thankful to be here. I want to remind you again, so I don't forget, please sign my handbook for me. I would love it if you guys do that, so just catch me anytime. This is a message that I shared at last year's TRLCs, and then I shared again at our convention. And this is a real interesting place to share this, because what I'm talking about is the pioneering spirit in Trail Life. And having spent about 10 days here in Alaska, my gosh, you guys is pioneering in your DNA, in your soil, in the air that I breathe, and everything that I see around me. And so to be talking to you guys about being a pioneer is it's a little intimidating for me, because you guys know this stuff and you live this. You have, like I said, it's in your very DNA, the kind of people that you are, what it is that you do. I was sharing with somebody how, in Alaska, things aren't easy, but they just kind of figure it out. Like we're thinking about taking a real quick train ride up to Healy, I think, and we were like, so when we get off the train, what's the station address? We don't really know. I'm talking to the people who run the train. Well, is there a place where we can stay? Well, maybe, Something, this is just how these folks do this here. It's just kind of... So apparently the train just kind of slows down and you hop off in Healy, and you hope that you can find your way to somewhere where you can spend the night, So it's remarkable kind of stuff. So I'm thinking, geez, in the lower 48, we'd have a booth there where you're going to buy a souvenir and 14 things before you get 6 steps off the train, and someone's going to pick you up and drive you and put you in your little air-conditioned place that you've already seen pictures of it, and it's getting 14 emails from them what your expectations are. That's not how you do things here. I'm discovering that. Just kind of, you get there and you figure it out. And that is am I right about that? Okay. And this stuff is in you guys. And so our whole experience, and Rob and I have been there from the beginning, the experience of Trail Life has really been a pioneering experience, because there's been so much stuff. I remember a board member at the beginning saying, what are your goals? It's like a year and a half. What are the goals? And I'm like, just to get to tomorrow right now, And at one time, I remember we had 11 people on staff at the time, and we were all sitting around the conference room table. And this research tells you that half the people are goal setters, and half people are problem solvers. That's their preferential way of engaging the world. You're either a goal setter, I'm going to go do this, or you're a problem solver, like, well, what's on fire? And so we went around the table with 11 of us, and all 11 of us were problem solvers. Wasn't a goal setter in the room. And it's like, that's what we needed, because everything was on fire. This probably isn't intimidating to you, but we were building the plane as we were flying it. And so to have for God to have set us a bunch of problem solvers, including Rob and others that we all worked together, was quite a thing. And I realized that that's probably the story of your life and how it is that you live here. Last night I shared some about that boy, and I didn't get to something that I really wanted to share, and I want you to write this down. My wife shared this with me, and I really want to include more about this in what I talked about last night. This is for parents, and it'll also help you with that boy. Let me find it. The author of it, or the video, is by Jonice Webb, Jonice, Dr. Jonice Webb, Jonice. And the video is 9 things the emotionally attuned parent says to their child. It's a YouTube video. And I would encourage you, as a leader in your troop, to watch that several times. And if you have a child living in your home, if you're a parent, or maybe you have grown children who could use this type of messaging, I would encourage you to watch that. It skirts all alongside a lot of the things that I talked about last night, but she just says some really powerful stuff in a really good way. So I would encourage that for you guys as a resource. I'm sorry? The title? 9 things the emotionally attuned parent says to their child. It's on YouTube. And it's interesting the way she develops, because she says, some parents will say this, but you should say this. And I'm going through the list, and it's like, man, my parents nailed it. They said all 9 things you shouldn't be saying. And it just talks about what we talked about last night, emotional connecting, and the importance of that boy understanding that he is seen, he is heard, he's known, he matters, and how valuable that is in producing emotionally healthy children. Again, we can get children who behave, but that's all you've got. I was a child who behaved, but the emotional investment wasn't there in the way that it needed to be. So I learned how to behave. I learned how to do the right thing, but I didn't really learn how to do the sort of an emotional kind of connection, appreciate the emotional connection. And now I'm learning this at 62 years old. So I'm encouraging you to do that and pass on some of those skills and some of those awarenesses for the boys and men that you work with and in your own household. All right, let me go into the speech. I was saved when I was 25 years old, and I joined a church that met in a bar. And we'd go in early on Sunday morning, and we'd mop up the place and clean up the beer bottles and wipe down the surfaces that reeked of cigarettes and alcohol. But that ministry was the type of one that you'd be familiar with. We had a real burden for the homeless and runaways of Daytona Beach, Florida. Daytona Beach, Florida at the time was one of the #1 destination for runaway teens, because they had seen on TV how spring break was, and they just figured, I'm going to go down there and I'll just party all the time. Well, spring break is a couple weeks long, and the rest of the year it's not. So these kids would show up in town and really would just be taken advantage of. And so we would go out and feed the homeless and the runaways of Daytona Beach. In fact, my wife, Michelle, who I can now recognize, she wasn't here when Rob recognized her, but there she is. Thank you, honey. We courted going out on the boardwalk of Daytona Beach, giving bologna sandwiches to homeless people. That's what we would do. That's what we did. We didn't go to the movies and stuff like that. Well, we probably did, but a couple times a week, you'd find us out on the streets ministering to homeless people. And because of our faithfulness in that building, we had this homeless ministry and ministered to the homeless, then we're finally gifted a building. And it was formerly a Jewish synagogue. And at the time, I had no idea what it was before it was a synagogue. So we made it a church and a homeless ministry where we dished out hot meals, free clothing, ran a food pantry, offered showers, haircuts, help in locating a birth certificate or driver's license, which was critical for somebody living on the streets. They want to get a job, they want to do something, but they don't have a driver's license, they don't have anything, so we would help them with those sorts of things. That could mean the way towards someone being reunited with their family or getting home or finding a job or somehow changing their circumstances. And that's where I met my wife. She showed up one night as a volunteer to wash dishes in that homeless ministry, and she stayed, thankfully. But I was frequently in that big building at 507 Wild Olive Avenue. I love that name, that street, 507 Wild Olive. Pastor Mike, where are you? Probably appreciate that name as a Messianic Jew. 507, 5 the number of grace, 7 the number of perfection. Wild Olive, the olive that's grafted into the vine. That was the address there, 507 Wild Olive. I was frequently in that building all by myself. Rather plain sanctuary, back halls and rooms that served as classrooms under previous congregations. Now there are changing rooms or food pantries or counseling offices, and the scars on the rough plaster of the walls of those rooms in the back told a story. You could look at those walls and see that shelves used to hang there, a picture hung there, or a flannel graph, if you remember those, or a chalkboard or something else must have hung on another wall. You could read the stories on the walls in the building just by the scars from what had been there before. And I always wondered about the pioneers that had gone before. What were their dreams? What were their hopes? The people who inhabited that building before we got there. And to them, hanging that flannel graph was something that they purposed to do and thought about. And now it's no longer there, and But what were they thinking at that time? How would they feel about the investment of their lives in that building? How would they feel like what it has now become? I always had a sense of destiny in that place, like I had a special connection, not just to the building itself, but to the faithful pioneers who served there before, the people that came there and served God in the way they served Him. Pioneers who struggled and dreamt about what could be done with this consecrated space. They poured themselves into whatever far-off vision they were called to. They planned and built the building. They painted and furnished it. They refurnished it throughout the decades, each pioneering group envisioning their own future for the building. They held in their hearts a vision of what it could be, and in their hands the ability to do their part in shaping that building towards their future. Kind of like the early pioneers in the settling of America, or perhaps some of the folks who came through this area and settled. Have you ever thought what it might be like to have been amongst those who crossed this country and settled? Cross the raging rivers, make your way through frigid mountain passes, all the while living out of covered wagons. They called them prairie schooners. Fighting enemies, fighting disease, fighting weather, fighting hunger. Or maybe to be a later pioneer in following a difficult but worn path to come upon an established settlement with buildings and structure and trading posts and maybe even a hot bath. At some point, you would begin raising your children in that settlement. Children that never knew life on the trail. To them, the settlement had always been there. The mystery somewhat gone, the blood, sweat, the tears that prepared the ground for the new growth, long absorbed into the foundation, into the walls, into the very fibers, the timbers of that settlement. Some of you have just stumbled into this building or upon this tidy settlement we call Trail Life USA. Coming upon it for the first time and saying, wow, there's something here. Or at least it's very new to you. You see the materials, you see the structure, and although it's your first time seeing them, you have to know that there are many someones here before you. Over 110,000 people have been historically members and gone through Trail Life USA. What a different place for the pioneers and the early members of our still young program. Pioneers who, in the midst of a cultural battle, forged the essential foundational legal structure, designed the program, secured and settled, developed Camp Aiken, our home office facility, hired staff, trained people for roles that had never been done before, envisioned and developed the volunteer structure, the core values, the statement of faith, the statement of values, pursued adventure, character, and leadership opportunities in over 1,000 troops, now over 1,100 troops across the country, conducting hundreds of activities and campouts, powerful experiences for boys, to begin the process of raising generations of courageous young men who honor God, who lead with integrity, who serve others, who experience outdoor adventure. The organization grew through the activity of these pioneers, many of whom settled and worked as if things had always been this way. We're blessed to enjoy the work of those who labored to create a ministry that's so easy for us to take for granted, where it's possible for our complaints to outpace our thankfulness, because as settlers, it's easier to criticize the settlement than to be grateful for a work in progress. Or think about the other elements that are so much a part of who we are now. The trail life name, debated by pioneers with some discord, but it's unquestioned now, it's settled. The trailman in our logo, what is that on his back? Why is it a silhouette? Which way is he facing? Should he be holding a standard? All points argued by pioneers, but now forever settled. The uniform, what colors would it be? What design would it be? What kind of fabric? What cost range should we look at? Would it be too much like or not enough like the Boy Scout uniform? How different can a shirt be? I remember someone saying after seeing the design of the Trail Life uniform, it's just like the Boy Scout shirt. I remember thinking, really? Because it has sleeves and buttons? Taking a huge leap of faith and placing an order for thousands of uniforms using funds from the First in Uniform program. How many of you participated in that First in Uniform program? Thank you, sir. An idea from the pioneers at a gathering in Waco, Texas. That's where the First in Uniform came from. All the conflict is settled for the most part. Handbooks came together from nothing in 4 months. They were originally packed and shipped by a troop in Florida that fulfilled those orders as a fundraiser. That troop would get $1 for each handbook. So they'd gather for the troop meeting, and then afterwards they'd print out the labels for the handbooks that had been ordered, stick them on envelopes, stick a handbook in the envelope, seal them, put the postage on them, and take them to the post office. And they got $1 for each one that they packed and sent. Pioneers built a membership platform in 90 days so we could launch on January 1st, 2014. It wasn't pretty. A pioneer's life on the trail never is, but it worked. Some people have come upon Trail Life and they've only known Trail Life Connect. We didn't have that before 2019. Trail Life Connect is still relatively new, but it has the feeling of being with us forever. There are pioneers still with us who fought a tough battle for Trail Life Connect, a high-stakes who's going to blink first game of digital chicken to liberate us from Troop Track. Anybody remember that experience of Troop Track? And usher us towards operating in Trail Life Connect. That's settled. That's something that happened, but it's now just part of who it is that we are. Then there's a leader's guide and patches and badges and thousands of details and policies, processes, plans across troops and all 50 states. Now we navigate the streets of this settlement of Trail Life USA as if it's always been here. In some ways, many of us in this room must feel like we're like a generation born in a settlement with structures around us built by pioneers. Still, and I need you to hear this, we're not yet settlers. None of us are settlers yet. We, in this room, no matter how long you've been with us, we're still pioneers. We're engaging every day with a new unknown, a lofty goal. And our 10-year target of being within 30 miles of 90% of America's boys is a big deal. We're all pioneers toward that goal. The campaign to rescue America's boys who are desperate for somebody to stand up for who it is that they are. We're all part of that vision, pioneering a way to reach boys in ways that just nobody else is doing. A boy needs us in his own unique way because not all boys are alike. As a pioneer, you have an irresistible call to a mission that's much bigger than we are individually. A call that includes that boy who needs someone with a pioneering spirit to truly see him for the first time, Not as the nuisance he is every other place in his life, but as the finished work that God sees in his intensely loved creation. That although scarred and abused by an imperfect world, that boy still bears somewhere deep the image of his maker. And maybe you are the pioneer who will envision and uncover a better future for that boy. It's sort of your own Klondike experience to dig from the broken heart of that broken boy, the gold that identifies him with his Creator. You're retaining the spirit of the pioneer and the commitment to our core principles and convictions. We all know how tragic it is to see a storied organization lose its way because it's lost the spirit of its pioneers, left to wander dry and senseless paths. Trail life is not all settled. It's still being pioneered by us, by you, a new generation of pioneers who are planning, dreaming, creating, as if for the first time, because every boy deserves the experience, if he was the only boy left on the planet, to be reached by men like you. Every time a troop is chartered, it's new ground being pioneered. New families are being engaged, a Wild West of sorts, to explain and train folks in a program of ministry that's still very new. Leadership roles are being filled for the first time in troops. Trailmen, youth and adult, are stepping into roles for the first time themselves. You may be the first person in your troop or in your town to occupy the role you're in. You're blazing the trail for other pioneers to follow, to see how you made it work. We're the pioneers. We're not yet settlers. The work you do in your troop to meet the deep needs of every boy, and believe me, there's a lot of boys in need of what you have to offer. Balance your family commitments, learn a new skill, navigate the challenges of time and resources and people, makes you a pioneer. Others will walk for the first time in the work you are doing in your troop, in your church, in your city, towards this cause. Like the fatherless boy who walked into a troop thinking he was going to learn to camp and discover that he was going to encounter the love of his heavenly Father through a man who became a father like to him. This is the spirit of the pioneer. Still evident on a daily basis, fighting battles, doing the things that need to be done. You don't roll out of bed and clock into a troop somewhere in a role that's been vacated for you. You build your role on the trail based on what is needed to advance the vision and achieve the mission that God will change the life of a boy and the family he serves someday, to improve the future of a boy, to blaze a trail for him toward becoming a godly man in a culture that's seemingly trained against that vital end. For the early American pioneers, it was freedom, conquest, independence. Now we dream, we collaborate, we recruit, we plan, we launch, we operate our troops in the name of Christ-centered, boy-focused adventure, character, and leadership for generations of boys that we may never meet, and for the spiritual maturity of those that we do. See, a lot of people look at trail life as being some sort of an ark to hide our boys in an uncertain culture. But some people see it as a battleship being built and occupied in order to engage a culture. I don't think we're just, and I think we're a little bit of both, but I approach it that we're not just pouring into these boys so that they can survive this rising tide. I believe we're pouring into boys so that they can turn back the tide itself. I think it may be too late for my generation because we simply don't have the influence over the next generation. But I believe that there's a remnant rising in the boys that we're speaking to and that God is doing something in their hearts, and they will be the ones that will save us. We think we're saving them, and we are, but I think we're raising up a generation that will save us. We're not yet settlers. Someday, if we're faithful, future pioneers will follow us in each of our roles, enjoying a culture and traditions, enjoying a legacy, systems, strategies, policies, tools, habits, plans, ideas that we in this room pioneered to be passed on. The work you're doing today will serve boys not yet born. A boy someday, somewhere will smile and stick out his chest a little bit more because he tried on his first uniform, joined a movement focused on his future. He earned an award. He started his first fire with flint and steel. He made a decision to follow Christ. He climbed his first 14er, learned he could do hard things, led a patrol, or led another to Christ, all the while being equipped for a world that seems to be set more against him every day. On and on, the work we're pioneering today will serve boys generations from now as they honor God, as they lead with integrity, as they serve others, as they experience outdoor adventure. Because you, the pioneer, did the hard stuff. You navigated the rivers. You managed the mountain passes. You fought off the enemies, pioneered something that would impact the life of a boy. Meaning, purpose, significance are found in such questions. In aligning our lives with God's purposes and lives committed to following Jesus Christ. This life-changing work you do every day is something you need to be proud of. Perhaps we will be settlers someday, but we're not yet settlers. Honestly, I don't think most of you would be happy being a settler without a vision and a challenge and a mission that you influence. I doubt you'd find any semblance of joy in doing what you're doing. Anybody can settle. Settle for less, settle for a tie, settle for good enough. I really believe that if you've been called to this mission, that isn't you. You didn't join because it was easy. There are other organizations that are already settled that are much more easily navigated. But you came here because you wanted a challenge. You came here because you understand that if what you are doing can be done in your own strength, it's likely not worth doing. You know that to create a legacy that will honor God, you've got to live on the edge of your faith, to conquer and occupy new ground for the sake of the kingdom. Certainly we're here for such a time as this because this mission calls for the pioneer. True heroes like you who choose making a difference over simply making a living. You choose principled convictions rather than political correctness. You sacrifice for a future you may never see, where the boys you pour into become the rescuers of the next generation. Listen to this quote from Billy Graham. God leaves us here because he has a mission for us to fulfill. We aren't here by accident, neither are we simply to enjoy the good things life has to offer. We are here because God put us here, and he has a sovereign purpose in keeping us here. It's true for us as individuals. It's true for his body, the church, and all of its fullness. As Jesus prayed just before his arrest and trial, I'm not praying that you take them out of the world. As you sent me into the world, I also have sent them into the world. Gentlemen, I thank you for embracing a vision with a golden future that you may not be around to witness. The faith you walk in every time you stoop down and meet a Woodlands trailman at eye level, making sure he knows he's seen, he's known, he matters. Every time you tolerate the idle wandering streams of consciousness of a navigator. Every time you stop to give an adventurer an eye-to-eye encouraging word and acknowledge he's welcome in the company of men. You're advancing this pioneering journey towards something full of goodness, full of his truth. We're not yet settlers, yet the work we're doing together will secure a place in the hearts and futures of thousands of boys you may never meet. Good on you, Trailman. That's a really big deal. I started out by telling you about that church building at 507 Wild Olive, Daytona Beach. Anybody remember that? Seems like a long time ago. A building I felt so attached to, so aware of the pioneers and generations that have gone before to secure that property for the use God intended for a new set of pioneers who settle it for a new vision. I invited my mother to that church one Sunday. After the service, I asked her what she thought. She said, "There's something really special about this place." She said, "It all seems familiar. But it feels like there should be a balcony above the stage, like a choir loft. Well, there was one at one time, I said. I knew because I could tell from the scars in that plaster that there was a structure that was removed, probably by the synagogue pioneers who had no need for a choir loft. 507 Wild Avenue. Not my hometown, but the town my father was born in and where he met and married my mother. Shortly after they were married, they had moved away from Daytona to Atlanta, where I was born. When I was 6 months old, my father was offered work in Miami, Florida, so they loaded us all in the car and headed south. They happened to pass through Daytona Beach on a Saturday and decided to spend the night. They woke up early Sunday morning intending to take me to the church where they had married to get me baptized. They drove to the church to discover that the pastor who had married them had been reassigned to another church in town, so they took me there as a baby to 507 Wild Olive Avenue, where I was baptized in a building that had a choir loft over the stage. You see, unbeknownst to me, that church was a Presbyterian church before it was a Jewish synagogue. It was the building where I had been baptized as a baby. In the building where I fed and loved on hundreds, if not thousands, of homeless people, where I met and married my wife, where I preached my first sermons, I had been baptized and didn't even know it. You know, there's a wonder to the destiny God has set out for us. And I think he smiles when he sees us walk in these clever plans that, to us pioneers, feel out of control. Random settings, random decisions. Just before we came out here, I overheard my wife sharing with Allison the story of how I was grafted in to the beginnings of Trail Life. A number of random settings, circumstances, coincidences, interactions not worth noting at the time, but packed full of providence and purpose. You have had those things too. We're not a household name. Think about how you found your way here. The person you ran into at the mall, or somebody at work who said something, or something you saw somewhere, a Facebook post somebody shared. Whatever way that you were brought here seems so incidental, but it's so full of purpose. I think God smiles on those things. There's an order. There's a design to this wild ride of being pioneers in trail life. But God has it all figured out. He knows where we fit. He knows the pioneers who have gone before us. He knows what our pioneering will mean to those after us. He knows the trail behind, the trail we're on, the trail ahead. He sees it all at once. And I thank him for you. This happy little band of brothers, pioneers who trust him and move in faith with courage and uncovering the mysteries he has for us and the blessing he has for those who will follow after us, which is why trailmen are the best men I know. God bless each of you and your families as we continue as pioneers together in this big kingdom business we call Trail Life USA. God bless you.
We are on the home stretch. What comes next, you wonder? I need Mike Parnell, Mark Hancock, Corey, and Terry to come up to the stage, please. And you could either bring a chair or stand here or sit on the edge of the stage. It matters not to me. Okay, you guys will figure that out. What's about to happen? They wondered. So what's about to happen? Oh, thank you for those chairs. So what's about to happen is this. We are going to have a Q&A. Feel free to take whatever chairs you want. Thanks, Daniel. And that means anything that you want to ask this panel of experts or each other in the room, that's what I'm talking about. I'm going to say something funny just so I can hear your laugh one more time. See, I love this laugh. So maybe you heard something from one of us as speakers. Maybe you learned something in your workshop breakouts. And what I'm going to do is ask these guys to take a microphone. Mike has it. And I'm going to take this roving microphone and I'm going to rove around. Do you have a second roving microphone? Does yours work? Can you speak in yours? It's on mute. I guess. So we are going to rove. We're going to rove around.
Amen.
You ready? Want to rove?
I'll do it.
Okay, so we're going to rove around. All you got to do is slip your hand up like this, and then I'm going to give you the microphone, and you can ask anybody here or anybody out there whatever you want. You ready? We're going to go for about 20 minutes or until this just falls on his face, either one. All right, so ready, set, go. Show me how you know how to do it. Look, JP.
So the question I guess I have that's been on my heart a little bit since yesterday evening, anybody can speak to it, but Mark, last night you were talking about that boy. I think that resonated with pretty much everybody here in one form or another. And so I got kind of a two-part question, I guess. It's difficult for me to connect with that boy because like you, I was the other way, the one that was always good, always achieving, always being perfect, and have wounds from that. And so I have the tendency to try and call that boy to be more perfect, right? And so that is speaking to the heart of a man. This question is speaking to the heart of a man who wasn't that boy. And then the other part of it is, as a troop master, as someone who's trying to bring up other leaders, how do we engage that boy who's grown up and become a man now? Right, there's a number of dads in my troop that were that boy and still have, those wounds and stuff that they carry with them. They still feel like they don't fit in. They're awkward in the parent meetings and leader meetings and stuff like that, right? I've got a couple of guys in particular I think of that are committed dads. They're there every single week, but they're a little different, right? Because they were that boy and they still are. So can you guys speak to a little bit of connecting with both of those kinds of men?
That's the longest question ever right there. It's pretty good. I like that.
That is a good question. A couple things. Welcome to the club of the guy who sits and says, why can't everybody just do this right? I think you're on your way to realizing some things, which is that we're all broken, we're just broken in different ways. And so there isn't, that boy, although because we focus on behavior, it would seem that that boy is more out of kilter than you and I would be. When it comes right down to it, emotionally, the needs are exactly the same. And that doesn't change. It's just we chose a different choice, a different direction than that boy did. And you're right. I said last night that there's a boy in every man and there's a man in every boy. And I challenge you to speak to that man and call the man and the boy and call him into the company of men to let him that begin to grow on the inside of him. This is where I belong. This is what I am. And the strategy doesn't change when you're speaking to the boy in the man. So those principles are still the same. Connect with his heart, listen to him, find out where he is, being there. This is stuff that I'm learning. I would encourage you, steer you back to that video that I mentioned. There's some good principles in there that can be applied not just to your own kids, not just to that boy, but to the men in your troop. It's the things that help people to feel that they're a part, that they're here, they're heard, they're known, they matter. So the strategy doesn't change for the man that's in that boy or for the boy that's in that man. In fact, you could have that talk last night and call it that man, never referring to the leaders that you're talking about in your troop. It's the same answers. And I'm just on the beginning edge of figuring this stuff out. And a lot of it has to do with the journey that I'm on personally, to figure out where I am. So I would encourage you to go on that journey and dig deep in who it is that you are. And then you can present yourself in a more present way, a more authentic way, a more vulnerable way, and modeling that is going to help those men that are around you. Does that make sense?
Wow. Woo. This is different than I'm here, Mark.
Oh, there you
I'm that guy right here.
Yes,
you
are.
We got next question. Here we go, and it can be for anyone.
Ooh, make it easy.
We're everyone.
So Corey's probably freaking out right now that I have the mic, but this is not to Corey or Mike. He says, I know what he's going to ask. So given the pioneering spirit that Mark just talked about, when or ever or if will we ever get some updates to the health and safety guides for Alaska, since everything we do here is high adventure and illegal, i.e. we can drive on lakes up here with our cars, and we can also ice fish on them. We go camping in hot tents that have stoves right in the middle of the tents, all of which we have to do under charter org because Trail Life doesn't let us.
I understand. We're actively working on that. In fact, Mr. Witt is on the team that's working on that, and I believe.
I actually do have a question. I'm reaching out to the home office.
Yeah.
We finished that last year, and then it went to the insurance lawyer.
Yeah.
I'd like to find out.
Yeah. I'm with you. As you know, we solved that problem with shooting sports because we want shooting sports to be active in trail life, and the way that we solve that through if it's good with your charter organization, if it's good with, I forget there's three-step thing, but if it's legal, if it's whatever, there's three, and that should apply to a lot of things. The challenge specifically with ice fishing, and this is why we're struggling with a little bit of that one, is although there are plenty of places who can accredit certain rules around shooting sports from the NRA to all, because we can point to and we say, this is how they say to do it. There's not a national accrediting recognized office of people who say this is the proper way of doing ice fishing. So the ones that are like that are a little bit more difficult for us to get beyond. I realize there's professionals, there are experts, there are all kinds of things, but these have to be people that the insurance people recognize as saying, okay, in a court of law, we can point to the NRA and say they're respected, they've been around, everybody knows them, this is who they are, and they say to do guns this way, and so we acted safely. We don't have an agency like that specific for ice fishing. So we're trying to get creative in how to convince those guys who've never been to Alaska that people do this. We hear from people in Minnesota and Michigan, so you've got other folks on your team who are fighting you for that, and we're fighting for that also. Just we have to think in terms of protecting the entire organization, so sometimes we come to the conclusion, we say, you know what, they can still go ice fishing. We want to fix this, but we're not keeping people from figuring out ways to go ice fishing, and that's kind of what it is that you've done. So I don't want to say that it's not urgent or that it's not critical. We're very interested in getting that fixed, but it just takes some time. So thank you.
So the insurance company needs to hear your pioneering service.
Yeah. The insurance guys are not interested in pioneers. They want settlers. Settlement is one of their big words they use regularly. Settlement, yeah. Let's just settle, so, yeah.
Hey, thanks. I just felt my heart rate accelerate, so I may speak choppily real quick. But I had a particular flavor of question about a particular type of that boy. And it's one that I grew up around with and experienced and saw happen. And so for me, it's that kid that, maybe in a single parent household, they didn't know what to do with that kid, and they've fallen into this culture of hyper-medicalization as well. And so I've watched, fellow peers of my own get medicalized into a zombie state on amphetamines. And, we have parents coming into our troops and, they want us to give the kid Ritalin at camp and everything. And I personally struggle with that deeply sometimes when it's like I'm watching this person just collapse in on themselves. And I don't know quite yet how to approach that within the troop and in the program. Do just abide by the parents' wishes? Do I reach out to them and tell them that I'm struggling with this personally? Do I, get our church and troop to decide what we're going to do with the medication and this kind of stuff within the organization? Do we write that into our bylaws? And so just kind of what would be an experience that you guys have had with that? What's kind of the policy of the organization with medication and these kinds of things? Thank you.
Thanks. I had taken all these questions, but I think you guys are okay with me doing that. One of the reasons that we partner with the local church, and we're committed to that partnership, is because they are the closest to the families, the closest to the issues. They know. Sometimes people will come to us and say, "Hey, can you scholarship this family?" And we would be glad to do that. We don't want any boys to do that, but the church is closer to that, and they know that family. They know if they're if they're creating a problem by scholarship or not. So, and this is that same sort of thing. So we don't pretend that from the home office somewhere we have some sort of special knowledge that can solve that kind of thing, but I would encourage you to work with the resources that you have in your charter organization, seeing how to approach that family and help that family. But I understand what it is that you're talking about. We are, ADD diagnosis, in my opinion, a lot of times it's DAD is the problem. It's not ADD. And I think there are legitimate diagnoses of ADD, but I think we do take some shortcuts there with boys. But I would lean on your charter organization in that.
I am shocked. We're going to get to his in a minute. This is the most sensitive group we've ever seen. They're like rugged individualists in Alaska, but they're asking stuff about like heart stuff. That's pretty cool. Pretty cool. Yeah, I guess they're feeling. I thought the cold would drive that out of you, but nope, sure didn't.
Okay. Hi, guys. This is loud. Mark, my question's for you. Again, not to take everybody out of the spotlight, but I'm curious from a CEO or leadership perspective, what's been, if you want to share, what's been the greatest challenge you faced as CEO, and how did you overcome it?
You're making an assumption at the last part of your question that I've overcome it.
Rob?
Besides Rob, biggest challenge. A friend of mine who's a ministry, Manhood Journey. Any guys familiar with Manhood Journey? Kent Evans said to me this recent, I think you were with me when he said it, and it just really rang true in my heart. And you guys will know this. This isn't specific to me as a CEO. When you're leading an organization, whatever it is, when you're leading a troop, whatever, you're really running two organizations at the same time. You're running the one that you have today, and you're running the one that you see in the future. And so my greatest thing, and Rob will tell you this, the staff probably sees me as a curmudgeon, unhappy, very difficult. It's very difficult for me to celebrate wins because I'm looking at where we're not yet. And so I have to discipline myself to slow down and say, everybody else sees today and sees what we just accomplished today, and they need me to see that, enjoy that with them, and not be stuck on, all right, what do we fix next? Where do we go next? So that's a big challenge of mine, is to rein that in and to realize that not everybody is seeing what it is I'm not seeing, not because I'm special, but because I'm in that position. That's a responsibility of mine, is to look ahead and see things, look for things that nobody else is looking for, so I see them first. So that's a big challenge, trying to stay in the present with the staff, celebrating those things, but also not being content in that we're not yet what I see us being, and living in that space. My wife will probably tell you, we go to a movie and we'll walk out, and she'll say, did you like it? And I say, yeah, I liked it, but, and so it's... And so, why can't I just like the movie? But it's like, why would it ended this way? Or I kind of wish this character, so it's always this sense of, I want to make it better, and that's really challenging. So I'm learning to live more in the present and slow down a little bit and celebrate where we are. Anybody else experience that? You lead an organization with yours? Okay, thank you. Corey, okay.
I'm going to flip the script first, because I'm afraid you're going to ask Mark Hancock a question, and we can't have that. So I'm going to put Mike Parnell on the spot right now. Mike, What do you want to see happen in this region, including Alaska, over the next few years? What are you looking for? What would you like to see happen in trail life? I didn't script him, so this may take him a moment to think this through. But
Well, I would love to see, even if we just had 10 boy troops everywhere. I think the whole huge troop growth part, it's a rodeo. It's a challenge. And sometimes we spin our wheels so much because we have so many folks in front of us. That's just its own tangle. But if we could have 40 10-boy troops, I mean, we'd be there. I think the ratio would be great, the attention that's needed, the delivery, the planning, all those things. It's a lot more manageable, I think, with the parent involvement. And I see such surging and kids go out and then surging. I mean, this roller coaster is really kind of a challenge for the team to manage through. So I just think it would be easier if we could just get on more corners in town, more churches, and lower it down so that we're able to actually manage through it. I think the whole thing would fly maybe a little less complicated.
so more troops, even if they're smaller, more troops.
Yep.
Corey.
So what I would love to see, and I need everybody here's help with it, I would like to see in the interior another Fairbanks troop and a Delta Junctions troop. And something I think in order for that to happen, I need people to pray for it. One thing that I was really encouraged is when we started our troop in North Pole, the home office said, we've been praying for a troop in the interior Alaska. And I was like, really? Like, you even know where the interior Alaska is? It's not funny, Palmer. Okay. But we could use 2 more troops to start with in the interior, and we need to be praying for Homer, Kenai, troops in the peninsula, because there's no reason we shouldn't have one. Then we need to look at breaking into 2 areas, an interior Alaska area team and then an Anchorage Matsu team. I think that'd be a great start. So another point man and NTO DSA. But I think that's a good, reasonable goal, and then keep pushing it and strengthen each other. And when we put out area events like Curtis is doing, we need to support each other. And we have, in the past, kind of looked inwards, and we need to start looking outwards, showing up to other troops' events, communicating. Some troops are very small, but other troops are large. And when the large troops have an event, there's no reason why your troop can't piggyback, and you can encourage each other. Fairbanks troop, North Pole troop, we do things all the time together. So that's what I like to see.
Excellent. Okay. Now let's get to the next question.
Is that me?
Yep.
Hey, gentlemen. Just real quick, I wanted to hear any anecdotes or general principles about good ways that you've seen to motivate, especially navigators. They're in this formative age where they want to be men, but they're still boys, and sometimes they're more one than the other. And what have you guys seen has worked best to motivate them, not just to get badges, but to open up, to work together, to be real about where they are on their faith journey?
That question may be open to it's probably also open to out here. I mean, there's probably somebody out here who was a navigator. I see a guy with his hand up. He's probably an adventurer now. Maybe he was a navigator. So let's see what happens out there. Are you answering this question or getting ready to ask the next one?
I was getting ready to ask.
No problem. No problem. No pressure. Just hold that microphone. Who has that experience? Who's been able to motivate navigators?
Anybody? I can take a jab at it. Patrol method. It's a proven method. It's been around for over 100 years. Problem is, a lot of us adults, we like to get in the way of it. You got to let the boys lead, make mistakes, learn from it. So if you don't know what the patrol method is and you weren't able to get into the class with Terry, look it up. It's a lot more than I can explain right here, but the patrol method works. And I can tell you from Dana's son, just in a quick experience, about 5 years ago we started our troop, and obviously the first year is a struggle. A lot of times adults have to teach the boys how to do things, how to run a patrol, how to run a camp out. Fast forward 5 years later, and I was working with the navigators, and I was troop master. Fast forward 5 years later, Dana, her family moved to the Fairbanks troop, and her son he's a first officer? He's a first officer. But he's acting as like the first officer. So he's a navigator, right? I mean, and our trail master, he was shorthanded with adults. So we did a joint camp out with AHG and Trail Life, and I volunteered and said, hey, I'll come help do Woods Tools. So I show up with my big bag of everything, right? I'm ready to teach the class. And our trail master, who's been working with him for a couple years, he's like, no, we'll let the boys do it, right? And I've been talking about patrol method. And I watched the two older boys, give the entire class, the entire instruction, and I just sit there and I was like, all right, they got it. But you have to let it grow. That's what I'm trying to say. You have to let it grow. Let the boys make mistakes, give them corrections, but let them lead. And every year they get stronger. And before you know it, when they're adventurers, they are running it. You know, you don't need to get in the way. So I hope that answered your question. You just got to learn about patrol method, elect your leaders, let those boys lead, and slowly just hand the reins off to them and let them run the show. And you'd be amazed at how far the troop can go.
That was way better. I was going to say cattle prod, because electric shock can work for navigators.
Hey, I would like to take a quick stab at this too. I did this with the adventurers before I left the last troop. I would give the adventurers, I'm going to do this with my navs because I have no adventurers at my current troop, but I took the adventurers and I had them go through a Bible Project video, and they had to summarize it and then ask woodland trails in the huge transition. The adventurers became the teachers. Their faith grew because they were required to do a very focused, disciplined study and then turn around and communicate it back to other trailmen. And then guess what the younger trailmen were doing? They want to be like that adventurer. And I'm about to start doing that with our navs. And they're on target. They're ready to do it. They want to do it. There's another question in the back, but... Okay, yeah.
So the other side, I'm not sure if you even asked this side, but I think you were asking this side. The other side is keeping the navs in the troop, the adventurers in the troop, and I'll say that's advisors. Because for our troop, when we've had strong advisors who are helping them basically move forward along the program, our adventurers stayed. When they left and we had weaker advisors, we went through our cycles where all of a sudden all the adventurers left. So not echoing everything Corey and I'm great, yeah. Everything they said is absolutely right about the patrol method. But also keeping them present, that's the other big thing. And for us, it's the advisor is kind of the key to that.
New question.
Okay.
So, Mr. Mike, or anybody who can answer this, what was the original Trail Life name that fell through before you figured out the actual Trail Life name?
There were a number of them that were pitched. I just remember some of them. Some of them were copywritten by others. There was Trailblazers. There was all versions of character, leader, and leadership and adventure. But none of them worked. Like ALC. It's like alcohol. No. CLA was owned by somebody else. Another organization had CLA. There's CAL, which is California. And so all these variations didn't work. There was some young men came up with other ones, and I'm trying to think of what the names. Do you remember any of the names, Mark? But there was what's that? Oh, yeah, there's a whole page of them. And we had a marketing group went around. They did focus groups with young people around the country to figure out. But one of the board members was very adamantly convinced that Trail Life USA was the right name, and that won the day. Is that a fair way to say it?
The first official name, we were incorporated as Youth Adventure Program.
Yep.
That was back in Nashville when we didn't know what our name was going to be, but we needed to start laying out some of the legal stuff. So we incorporated as Youth Adventure Program, and I think in 2015, after we had taken, we were incorporated in Florida after we got Camp Bacon and settled Camp Bacon and received Camp Bacon, we reincorporated in South Carolina as Trail Life USA.
Yep.
So just an aside to that, most of you know I do crane and rigging stuff, so we decided, getting an organization together, we decided Crane Rigging Association of Professionals was not going to land it. So it just never made the headlines. So when you do the acronym, it's just your mind explodes.
We have a question. This young man right here. Go ahead. Ask it.
Okay.
It's on. Here you
All
go.
right. So, wait, how did Boy Scouts start drifting away from God?
Oh, that's a great question. How did Boy Scouts start drifting away from God? I got some of that. Yeah. Yeah. Let's go. You start, Terry.
Hello? Yes, I am on. So one of the things I heard, and this may be hearsay, but they got involved with the United Way. And we're using United Way property. And if you know United Way's thought processes, the United Way started steering the Boy Scouts because, you're using United Way stuff and we're giving you money, you're going to do what we say. And that was one of the reasons Trail Life is debt averse, is because they don't want to owe anybody outside of Trail Life anything. So you can't have some organization like the United Way that says, well, you're going to do it this way because we say you will because you're using our stuff. So that's one of the things I heard.
I'm going to go way back.
Okay.
So probably about 1970 or so, Boy Scouts was at its heyday. They had about 5 million members. And they were struggling to remain culturally relevant when the kind of upheaval of our culture started in the early 60s on into the 70s. And membership for the Boy Scouts started to decline about 1% a year over the next 40 or so years. So they went down 40%, but about 1% a year, very slowly. In 2008, President Obama got elected. In 2012, he was reelected. And there was a cultural shift that was going on with companies to really embrace the LGBTQ culture. And with the reelection of President Obama, the makeup of the Supreme Court, the Boy Scouts had won a Supreme Court case back in 2001 that gave them the right as a private membership organization to decide their own membership standards. The Boy Scouts decided to, with the emphasis on remaining culturally relevant, to possibly change the direction of their downward cycle of membership and the corporate pressure and monetary pressure, not just United Way, but all of the large corporations that were paying the Boy Scouts millions a year. That was coupled with, in 2010 to 2011, the federal government said, we're not going to let you guys use the military bases anymore. Fort A.P. Hill was the Jamboree base for decades. And so you have to find another spot. Boy Scouts said, you know what? Our corporate guys can get behind making our own hundreds of millions of dollars property in West Virginia, which became the Bechtel Summit Reserve. The price tag on that quickly climbed to over $1 billion. And in 2012 to early 2013, the companies that were on the hook for millions were feeling the pressure from the LGBTQ lobby to require that the Boy Scouts either change or give up that money. So it's money, it's power, It is the desire to be relevant, the desire to appease and please the culture instead of changing the culture like we're trying to do, to just give into it and ride the wave the same way that they're all going. It's a very complicated way to answer your question, which was a great question, how the Boy Scouts lost their way. But the Boy Scouts was never built on the solid rock of Jesus Christ. The Boy Scouts was built on strong values. When it started in 1910, everybody agreed what those values were. Now they don't. Culture has changed. Jesus stayed the same. So we're going to stay with Jesus. How about that? All right. Is it your laugh that I've been loving the whole time?
No.
Who was laughing? Okay, it wasn't.
Well, okay, I guess the cat's out of the bag. Yeah, I guess I got a unique laugh or something. I got a best friend. I'm born and raised in Orlando. My best friend from Orlando, he says, Dane, if I ever lose you in the mall, I just text you a joke. And he can find me pretty easily. Anyway, so Mason, back to your question also about the money. When I was a kid, growing up in Florida, Boy Scouts, we had Camp Lenoche. Camp Lenoche, I loved Camp Lenoche. And then the grocery store, Winn-Dixie, I think they donated $1 million, gave them a large sum of money, changed the name to Winn-Dixie Scout Reservation. And that whole camp, I thought, at that moment in time, they took away our cool stuff, put in fancy toilets, and it was great, but that money just kind of changed that. I was 13, 14 at the time. I loved Camp Lenoche, but ever since they received that large sum of money, they changed how they did things there, and I noticed that they had to find go a different path, so to speak. They weren't doing, as far as I know, I was just a young man, but they weren't doing the LGBTQ stuff, but their method of camping changed, and they had to kind of fall in line with what the grocery store wanted them to do, I think. Yeah, follow the money. Anyways, just my 2 cents. Guys, I love having you here. Y'all are awesome.
All right, we're going to have time for one more. This is it. Give it to him. Can you have a second question? I guess he can. Okay.
I was doing my best to bite my tongue, but I got to answer your question. You guys did a good job of answering the question, but there are two kingdoms at war. There's God's kingdom and there's an enemy's kingdom, and the enemy wants to destroy you, and he wants to destroy every one of us, and that's what happened to the Boy Scouts. That's what happened to our culture. That's what we're fighting. Two kingdoms at war. Choose which one you'll fight for.
Good word.
I've got a quick logistic question for home office, I guess. We had some shipping issues with some patches or something like that late last year, and we learned through that there was some sort of shift in where products were coming from and who was doing some of the embroidery and stuff like this or whatever, and I don't need details about that, but it caused some conversations here on the West Coast and whatnot about kind of moving forward, right? So is there any process or idea or movement or anything to work towards having a West Coast-based inventory, points of contact, et cetera, for any of the materials and resources that we have? Somebody mentioned fundraising before. I think our troop could get into that.
Not that I know. I know that we are in the process of reevaluating that entire system, from everything from the platform that we use to the way that we handle our inventory, all sorts of things. Interesting thing we did, the folks who manufacture the uniforms for us, who source the uniforms for us, we turned them into a fulfillment company. They weren't doing that before. They're producing uniforms for Taco Bell and Dollar General and different football marching bands and things like that. And that's what they did, and they would ship them in bulk, but we turn them into a company that sends out one uniform at a time or one box at a time. And so they've grown a lot because we've done that. We have a very good deal with them that helps us to keep our costs manageable. But the thought of having like a West Coast distribution kind of thing, that isn't something that I've heard, but I'm interested in bringing that back as an idea, and I'll do that. The patches, I know the Embroidery on Demand is the company that's struggling with the patrol patches. Just demand got them, and I'm not sure where the solution is, but I have been party to those conversations, heard those conversations, and understand that that's an issue, and they're working on it. It could be that we end up with a different vendor by the time that's all over with, but we're doing the best we can to fix that. But thanks, that's a great suggestion.
So thank you to our panel. We'd like to thank them and give them a round of applause. Let's do it right now. So we have a couple of awards we're going to do and a recognition, and we're on the home stretch.
All right. Following in the mode of Raymond, would you come up to the stage? And Curtis, would you come up to the stage? And Corey, following in the mode of the pioneers discussion, I was with my compatriot in Kansas. David Bourne is the RTL there, and Raymond's has exposure having worked in Kansas. What I'm sharing with you is each one of the three individuals right here, I would consider pioneers in trail life, no matter where they've served, and they're now currently in Alaska. You've been on the road traveling, but doing trail life everywhere, and on national, and Corey on national, and traveling and taking trail life to Oregon as a leader, and long-term here, and Curtis since the founding of Trail Life. And you continue to spread out to look to see where I can help around the area. What impact can I make? What can I do for you? And these are people that are of service. And I just am so blessed to have you as friends and you guys as trailmen, and that Alaska, I think, really has benefited and will continue to benefit by your participation and assistance. I have a regional service recognition pin I'd like to give each of you. I think I've handed out 2 of them in 3 years, but I want you guys to know how much I appreciate everything you've done. So. Let's give them another round, please. I'd appreciate it. Thanks. Okay. You guys-
What are you doing, Corey? Oh, I got you. So you got to stay up here. The last thing I'm going to do is ask Mark to come back up, to ask Terry to come up, and to ask Mike Parnell to come back up. Don't go anywhere, Mike Parnell. I want to see how far you could walk before I called you back up here. And one more person, Dave Witt. Dave, where are you? Okay. So at the end of each Trail Ready Learner Conference, we pick 1 or 2 guys who really made an impact of putting it on. And it was kind of obvious this time. I mean, Point Man Corey has been organizing this from afar and doing video calls and stuff. And then here at the home front at church is Dave Witt. He has been handling the physical arrangements and getting people and stuff put together. And it's just really been an honor to meet you guys in person, but just to work alongside you and see what you have done and do on behalf of the people of Alaska. So what we do is we take a Trail Life Thin Line Bible, and each of us, Terry and Mark and Mike Parnell and myself, inscribed a short message to you guys and thanking you for this weekend. I just want to give you this Bible, and hopefully you'll read it and use it often. So the first one is for Dave. Thank you, Dave. and Corey. I know that Dave has final announcements. I don't know if anybody else does. I'm just going to hand the microphone to you guys and let you finish out because that's it for me. You ready?
You guys thought you were going to leave without getting something from us, right? Okay, well, I appreciate it. Thank you guys for coming up here. When was it, January, when Mike said, we got your first big assignment. And I was like, no. I just took over as point man, and I liked the job because there wasn't much to do. And then he's like, this TRLC, and I'm like, what is it? It took me about 3 months to figure out what TRLC meant. I'm still trying to figure out what RFSE, I'm not great with acronyms. But Trail Ready Learner Conference, raise your hand if you were confused by TRLC when you first, be honest, okay, Ben? But I'm so glad you guys came all the way up here to see this great big state of ours. There's not many of us. I think we're about 700,000 people in the whole entire state. But to come all the way out here to share the message, it's awesome. And I know you're all going to go home and you're going to talk to your troops and be like, man, you should have been there. And that's what they told me is going to happen. So please take what you learn here, go back to your troops, and spread what you learned, okay? And don't turn inwards. But now you need to get out, you need to stretch yourself, and you need to grow the program. But we'd like to give these guys just something to say thank you. So Raymond, if you want to help, Dave, if you want to help, there's a brown bag behind there. Nothing huge expensive, but something you can take home, put on your desk or on your little, wherever you put little knickknacks. But this is the official footwear of Alaska. Y'all know the Extra Tough, right? It's a little AK Tough boot, coffee cup. So each one of you get one of those. Super expensive. I'm going to tell you how long it took to make those. There you go. And then for your wives, we got just a little simple Christmas ornament for you. And since we like to give pins out, this is just an Alaska State little pin for your thing here. So, so we got a little flare. Cool. Great. So thank you very much for coming all the way out here. Appreciate you. Appreciate it. Thank you. Thanks a lot. And don't walk away. We got it. Oh, yeah. All right. Round of applause for these guys.
Flag later.
All right. Before we go into the closing, I'd like to ask all our navigator adventurers that came all the way out here, that were doing fire patrol, they were doing parking duty, they did our opening, and they're going to do our closing. So all the navigators and adventurers, if you can come up on stage, please. Yep. Okay. So these guys, they haven't complained once. They haven't given me a discount on beef sticks, even though I've probably asked. But they've been awesome. They've sat in classes, they've listened to these speeches, and they've been serving without complaining at all. So Terry would like to recognize you guys with a Northwest Regional pin. So you can go back and show them, everybody, your cool pin. All right, first officer, you can dismiss them. Okay, before we do the closing, I'm going to call Dave up here to do some housekeeping.